objectives for professional development, especially now when, you know, we're at a critical moment in terms of this Common Core implementation.
That's right. Yes, and I should say the teacher centers have been very strong partners around Common Core professional development, not just in the last year, but over the last several years. And they are very focused on supporting the success of the Common Core in classrooms across the state.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Krueger?
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Just double checking, because so many people have asked questions relating to Common Core. Did you somewhere in your testimony or in your answers say that the state was going to provide an actual standardized curriculum that school districts can use?
So we do. We provide, if you turn to see slide page 44 and page 45. We are building, although curriculum is a local responsibility, we are building curriculum materials that will ultimately cover the entirety of K through 12 as an optional resource for districts. Those curriculum materials are developed with New York State educators, include supports for students with disabilities and English language learners, and we'll continue to add to that collection of materials over time. It's one of the commitments we made in Race to the Top. To my knowledge, we're the only state that is making that significant an investment in curricular materials, and the pace of the provision of those materials is described on pages 44 and 45.
And you said over time, so how much time before there is a full, again, districts don't have to use it, but how much time before there's a full curriculum available from state SED for K through 12 that any district could use?
So K through 8 English language arts is available now on our engagednewyork.org website. Almost the entirety of K through 9. There are a couple of materials that will be added even in the next week or so on K through 9 math. All of those materials are available. The high school transition, as we talked about earlier, phases in over the next 3 years. And so the high school materials will come later. There are already 9th grade math materials. Those have been there since the summer, fall. But we will grow that collection of materials to include math 10 through 12 and English language arts 9 through 12 as well.
Just a little editorially, a year ago, I suggested that we shouldn't start the exams until we had a curriculum that students could learn from, but that's behind us. We have much discussion around the state, parents, teachers, students, you know, the dilemma of too many standardized tests, the difficulties, the dangers of just teaching to test, national requirements. Your testimony shows that there's only 2 regions that aren't overlappingly some kind of mandate. When does New York State say we don't need the Regents exams anymore?
We know the Regents exam tradition dates back to the 1860s, and I think has served the state well. The federal government requires a high school exam in English, math, and science, and so we use the Regents exams for those English, math, and science exams. We also require exams in social studies, global and U.S. Those are the only exams that we give, that we require as a state that aren't part of the federal No Child Left Behind requirements. I was a high school history teacher. I think those exams play an important role in our high school curriculum. That said, we have over the last decade added flexibility where students can substitute advanced placement exams, for example, for Regents exams. They can substitute the SAT-2 exams for Regents exams. Some schools offer international baccalaureate programs in place or as a supplement to the Regents exams. So there are options for alternatives, and the Board of Regents has been talking about a role that career and technical education assessments might play in the graduation requirements as well as a potential substitute for Regents requirements.
But is there a way going forward to, as you just described, there are alternatives to merge so that you are not saying, oh, you have to take this set of exams, then you also have to take this set of exams, even though 3 out of 5 things in theory overlap? I mean, I think that's one of the great frustrations we hear from educators and parents, that you spend your life teaching to test and there are multiples of variations on the same test.
Yeah, so just to be clear, our Regents exams satisfy the federal requirements. There aren't double high school requirements, but students do sometimes take the Regents exam and an AP exam in the same subject. Often that's because the AP exam is viewed as more challenging, and students want to make sure they score at a level that satisfies the Regents graduation requirement and don't want to take that risk with the AP exam, although we do allow a 3 or better on the AP exam to substitute for the Regents exam. Similarly, with SAT2 and the IB, you can substitute them for the Regents exams, but students typically take the Regents exam anyway. It's also sometimes about the calendar. You get your Regents exam score back right away. You have to wait some time to get the advanced placement score back, so forth.
Thank you. Thank you.
Assemblywoman Pauling?
Just have to try it, but just try it, start talking.
Does it work?
Yep.
Yeah, okay, good.
You just can't see the light.
Officially, good afternoon, and thank you for coming and for being so forthright with your answers. I want to get back to a line of questioning that my colleague, Assemblyman Brennan, had started, which is on the testing. You know, my districts have been pretty much unanimous in their support for the concept of Common Core, and one of my districts, in fact, is very impressed with the specific curriculum that they've been presented with. Their beef isn't necessarily with the idea or the establishment of the standards and or the commonality of the standards and the curriculum. Their concerns regard the rollout and specifically the assessments. And so I appreciate the response that you had given to the letter that a couple of us had, 3 of us had written to you in October, and it reflects somewhat of what you have in your prepared material. So I want to ask a specific question about, on page 49, you indicate that, essentially the standardized tests, which is the criticism, are very much mandated by the federal government. So what I wonder about is, does the federal government, or did the federal government also dictate when they needed to start? Because, of course, the criticism is that they've started too soon because the curriculum was just available, so teachers didn't know what to teach to best prepare their students for the tests, leading to frustration. The type of tests, did the federal government dictate how long the tests? One of the criticism is that 3rd graders have to sit for an extended period of time, and I respect the field question issue, but the test itself is very long, and the type of tests frustrate the younger ages in particular. Does the federal government dictate that it has to be a statewide test, or can it be local tests so that the local districts would have a better ability to gear the test toward their own students, but yet still test to the Common Core? Does the federal government dictate that teachers cannot get individual tests back, as we have in prior years, for them to best able to help individual students? Similar to that, does the federal government dictate that teachers can't get the tests generally back so that they could better prepare future students? So, while I understand that the federal government may say that grades 3 through 8, need to be tested in English and math, do they, in addition, lay out all of those other dictates in their requirements?
Thanks. I appreciate that question. So there is a requirement that you have a common statewide assessment system as part of No Child Left Behind. So the common test across the state so that you can compare performance across districts and across schools. That is part of the federal requirements. The question of timing and when do you switch the assessments to the Common Core is a question of trade-offs. You want the assessment to reflect the standards that you're teaching. The Board of Regents adopted the standards in 2010. The first, third through eighth grade assessments that reflect the Common Core were given in spring 2013. Some would argue we should have taken longer. On the other hand, as you look across the country, you see educators complaining in other states that the tests that are being given are based on the old standards, and yet teachers are being asked to teach to the Common Core standards. And so there's a tension between those two things, and every state has had to struggle with this question of when to begin the third through eighth grade assessments and how quickly to phase in high school assessments that reflect the Common Core. We chose a 7-year phase-in. We felt it was important to change the assessments to match what we were asking teachers to do in the classroom in terms of the Common Core standards. The question of time, we have in our assessment system an estimated or expected time on task, and then we allow students time beyond that to complete their work. Some states have a similar approach. There's a New England consortium of states that has a similar approach, giving an expected time and then additional time if students need it to complete the exam. Other states, like Massachusetts, for example, had untimed tests, and students can take as long as they need to finish. There's a balance to strike. We try to strike a balance by setting an expected time and then allowing students additional time to complete their work. We've actually shortened the test each year over the last couple of years and continue to look at this question and continue to try to strike the right balance. In terms of the release of test questions, teachers can get all of the student performance information, and they can get item-level analysis, question-level analysis for their students on the questions that we've released. We release about 25% of the items. We would like to be able to release more of the questions, and our budget request would allow us to do that, the $8.4 million that I mentioned earlier. Some states release no items, some states release 25%, 50%. Some states release test questions every other year or every couple of years. There are a variety of approaches across the country. We'd like to be able to release a higher percentage of questions than just the 25 that we did last year, and the budget request here would allow us to do that.
Thank you. Two other questions. One is in regard to quality stars. You mentioned that you invested $4 million, and you also then, in your last paragraph, say the state should provide sustainable resources to support the implementation of quality stars. I'm a big fan of quality stars, and I wondered, what it is you think would be adequate funding.
Well, it depends on the sort of pace of expansion of the program. Our $4 million Race to the Top investment, as you know, is focused on early childhood programs in the highest needs communities that have struggling schools. If we were to broaden that, one, we need funding to continue that $4 million when that grant ends in 2015. We need funding to continue that focus on high needs districts. If the pre-K program grows, we would need additional funding to expand to other high needs districts. Certainly our view is that as the governor and legislature work on a plan for pre-K expansion, quality stars and an approach to ensure quality, not just access, has to be a part of the discussion. So I hope that as we move forward, we can continue to talk about what portion of the pre-K funding will go to something like quality stars to monitor performance.
Thank you, Commissioner. I apologize. We have to keep moving. We still have a lengthy list. I know there are senators